Welcome, dear viewers, to this channel dedicated to lovers of literature and timeless novels. If you are a fan of engaging stories that hold profound lessons about life and humanity, you are in the right place. Today, we will immerse ourselves together in one of the greatest classic novels written by the English author, Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. This story is not merely a tale of an orphaned child. It's a mirror reflecting the cruelty of society in a time of poverty and injustice, and simultaneously, a flame of hope illuminating the path of innocence and compassion. Before we begin, don't forget to support us by subscribing to the channel and activating the bell icon to receive all our new content. If you like the video, please show your appreciation with a like and share so it can reach the largest number of literature enthusiasts. And now, let us open the pages of this astonishing novel and begin the journey with Oliver Twist, the child who defied hunger, injustice, and gangs in his search for the meaning of family and security.
A hungry childhood. Oliver Twist grew up in a place called the workhouse, but it bore no resemblance to compassion or kindness. It was closer to a large prison. Its walls were cold, its windows high, preventing even sunlight from entering, and its smell was a mix of mold and hunger. The children there knew nothing of childhood, but the pain of empty stomachs and the cruel eyes of the overseers. Their food was meager, barely enough to keep their souls alive. A watery soup poured into small brass bowls, which they called a meal, yet it could not satisfy a hungry child. As for the bread, it was a stale, hard piece that they took turns breaking with trembling fingers. With every meal, the hunger increased, never lessened. There was no warmth on the long nights, only thin blankets that did not protect them from the bone-chilling cold. In the mornings, instead of a smile to make them feel safe, they were met with the overseer's whip and looks of contempt that reminded them they were merely unwanted extra mouths. One day the hunger became unbearable. The children's empty stomachs cried out in silence, and whispers circulated amongst them about a dangerous idea. They gathered in a dark corner of the hall, their eyes full of fear and despair. After long hesitation, they decided to choose one of them to take the bold step, to ask for more food. The choice fell upon Oliver, the thin, blonde-haired boy who was the youngest and the most innocent among them. That night, they sat at their worn wooden tables, waiting for the moment. Oliver stepped forward with trembling steps, holding the small brass spoon as if it were his only weapon. He stood before the overseer, the stout, corpulent man accustomed to imposing silence by force, then raised his eyes fearfully and said in a voice that was barely audible, "Please, sir, I want some more." A heavy silence fell over the hall. Spoons dropped from the children's hands and astonishment showed on their faces. Even their breath seemed to stop. Someone had dared to say what no one had said before, but the moment of silence did not last long. The overseer erupted in thunderous anger. How dare a wretched orphan demand what he was not entitled to? Oliver was quickly dragged away from his spot, his screams lost amidst the cynical laughter of the officials and their gloating looks. They were not content with merely punishing him with beating and reprimand. They wanted to make an example of him. A large sign was hung on the workhouse door that read, "Who wants to take this boy as an apprentice? We are prepared to pay money to get rid of him." Thus Oliver, the hungry, innocent child, was turned into a commodity offered for disposal. But this moment, in all its cruelty, was the beginning of an amazing journey that would expose the cruelty of society, and at the same time, the unbreakable power of hope.
The beginning of a tormenting journey. Oliver was soon moved to work for an undertaker, a cruel man who treated him as a worthless servant. The boy found nothing but insults and heavy orders. The other children mocked him, and the adults treated him as a burden. One day, Oliver fought with another boy who insulted his deceased mother. It was the first time he had ever lost his temper. But the result was not in his favor. He was punished with confinement, deprivation, and beating. It was then that he made a fateful decision. He wouldn't stay here. He had to escape, no matter the cost. The escape to London. On a cold, heavily fogged morning, Oliver walked with stumbling steps on the long country road. He carried nothing but his thin body and his ragged clothes, and a small heart full of fear and hope at the same time. He left the orphanage behind, and the cruel faces that had shown him nothing but insult, beating, and hunger, and headed toward the unknown. He spent entire days walking. Sometimes he slept in fields or under scattered trees, wrapping his arms around himself to protect against the biting cold. His food was nothing more than a crumb of bread he found by chance, or a gulp of murky water from a small stream. Yet, he did not stop, as if an invisible force was pushing him forward, toward a city he had heard much about: London. When he approached it, the capital appeared to him as a giant monster, breathing the smoke of factories and the hustle of carriages. Oliver entered its crowded streets and was dazzled by what he saw. In the grand squares, opulent mansions, brightly lit shops, and people wearing the finest clothes. But as soon as he wandered a little into the back alleys, he discovered the city's other face: dilapidated houses, accumulated filth in the gutters, hungry children with bare feet, and men lurking in the shadows to rob passers-by. London was a city of contradictions: glory and wealth in the open, misery and darkness in secret. And for a weak, orphan child like Oliver, he didn't know if this city would be his salvation from a bitter past, or the beginning of a new hell.
Meeting the gang. After days of hunger and wandering through the streets of London, Oliver was walking exhausted in a narrow alley. There, his attention was drawn to a small boy standing confidently, in relatively smart clothes compared to the rest of the street children. His hat was tilted lightly on his head. His eyes sparkled with cunning, and a mocking smile never left his lips. The boy approached with sure steps and greeted Oliver warmly, saying, "You look tired, mate. Are you looking for a warm place?" This boy's name was Artful Dodger, nicknamed the Adroit Dodger. He was not just an ordinary child. He had a quick tongue and a marvelous ability to gain the trust of others. With his skill in speaking, Oliver felt a measure of reassurance. The Dodger told him he knew a place where he could find food and shelter, away from the cruelty of the streets. The Dodger led Oliver through winding alleys until they reached an old, dilapidated house in one of London's poor neighborhoods. From the outside, the place looked dark, its walls damp and cracked, and its narrow windows barely allowed light to pass. But to a hungry and exhausted child like Oliver, that house seemed like a chance for rest. The two boys entered, and there Oliver saw a sight he did not expect: a large room lit by a dancing candle wick on the walls. In the middle of the room sat an old man with a long nose and a grim face, his eyes sharp as if they could pierce souls. This man was Fagin, the gang leader. Around him sat a number of children, some Oliver's age, laughing and displaying small coins, a cloth handkerchief or a pocket watch, everything they brought from the pockets of passers-by. Fagin did not scream or threaten. He dealt with them as if he were a teacher to his students. He sometimes laughed and praised one of them for their skill in picking a wallet without the owner noticing. Oliver looked at them in astonishment, but he did not understand the true meaning of what was happening. He thought they were just children practicing strange games or amusing tricks. To him, the place seemed like a haven, offering warmth and companionship after days of loneliness and hunger. He didn't know that this meeting was the beginning of his slide into a dark world, the world of crime, where innocence does not last, and sin becomes a daily lesson the children learn at Fagin's hand. The false accusation. On a sunny morning, Oliver went out for the first time with his new companions, Fagin's boys, into the crowded streets of London. Everything was new to him: the noise of the carriages, the voices of the street vendors, and the crowds moving in every direction. As he walked among them with hesitant steps, he began to watch what they were doing. He saw how one of them approached a man preoccupied with reading a newspaper, and how his hand extended with astonishing swiftness into his coat pocket to pull out a handkerchief and then disappear in the blink of an eye. He couldn't believe his eyes. It seemed like magic. At first he thought what he was seeing was just a game or some kind of innocent trick, but he soon realized that what was happening before him was nothing less than real theft. Before he could comprehend what was going on, disaster struck. The Dodger and his companion moved toward an elegant old man standing in front of a bookstore, looking through books with interest.
With polished skill, they snatched his wallet from his pocket and bolted. Oliver stood stunned, his eyes wide with terror, his body trembling. He had not participated in anything, but he couldn't run away in time. The old man, later known as Mr. Brownlow, turned to check his pocket and discovered his wallet was missing. He shouted angrily, people gathered around him, and one of them pointed to Oliver, who was running in confusion, not knowing what to do. "That's him. He stole the wallet," shouted one of the passers-by. In an instant, a coarse hand gripped the boy's arm, and police officers violently led him away amidst the crowd. Oliver cried out in a shaky voice, "I didn't do anything, I swear I'm innocent." But no one listened. He was just a poor child, and society showed no mercy to the likes of him. He was taken to the police station, where he sat terrified in a narrow room until it was time for his trial. In court, Oliver stood frail, in soiled clothes, and pale-faced. The judge stared at him sternly, and the audience whispered, "He's a little thief. He must be punished." But the surprise came from the very man whose wallet was stolen, Mr. Brownlow. He looked long at Oliver's face, at his eyes filled with fear and innocence, then said calmly, "No, this child did not rob me. My eyes do not deceive me. He is innocent." Silence prevailed in the hall, and the judge ordered Oliver's release. Brownlow didn't stop there. He approached the trembling boy and gently placed his hand on his shoulder, saying, "Come with me, my son. I will take care of you." That moment was a turning point in Oliver's life. Out of all the cruel faces he had known, a man finally appeared who looked at him with pity, not accusation. A man who would be the door to a new phase filled with compassion and hope.
New life? In Mr. Brownlow's house, Oliver began to live days he had never imagined. For the first time since his birth, he didn't need to fear an overseer's stick or sleep hungry on a cold floor. He woke up in a warm bed, his covers clean, and a small window allowed the sun's rays, whose warmth he hadn't known before, to enter. He was given new clothes, fitting his thin body instead of the rags that had clung to him for so long. Delicious food was placed before him on a real table, not watery soup in a communal bowl. And when Mr. Brownlow sat before him with a fatherly smile, Oliver felt for the first time that he was not just an outcast orphan, but a human being worthy of kindness and dignity. In those days, Oliver began to change. His smile returned, his little laugh echoed through the house, and his bright eyes filled with new dreams. Perhaps he could have a family. Perhaps he could live a normal life like other children. But beautiful dreams are short-lived. Elsewhere in London, Fagin was boiling with rage. Losing one of his apprentices was something he could not tolerate. It wasn't just the loss of a child, but the loss of a dangerous secret. Oliver knew the faces of the gang, their whereabouts, and the nature of their operations. This was enough to expose everything. Fagin sat in his dark room, surrounded by the smoke of his pipe, his eyes gleaming with malice as he plotted what had to happen. "Oliver knows too much. We can't let him go. He must come back, or our fate is all in danger." It wasn't long before he sent his men into the streets, watching, stalking, until they found their chance. In a moment of unguardedness, Oliver fell into their hands. The boy tried to scream, to call for help, but their grips were stronger than his innocence. They dragged him away from the light, away from Brownlow's house, away from his brief dream. Thus, the days of tranquility ended swiftly, and Oliver was forcibly returned to the dark house he wanted to forget. To the hell of crime once again. Nancy ... A conscience in the dark. In the dark heart of London, where the scent of poverty mingled with the scent of crime, a character emerged who was unlike the others in Fagin's gang. This was Nancy, a young woman, beautiful despite the fatigue covering her face, and her voice carried the remnants of a tenderness erased by the noise of the cruel streets. Nancy had lived a hard life since childhood, gradually drifting into the gang's quagmire until she became a part of Fagin's world, working with thieves and submitting to his orders. But something within her resisted fading, her humanity. When she met Oliver, she didn't see him as just another boy caught in the gang's trap. She saw a reflection of her lost childhood. She remembered the days when she was innocent, playing like other children, before the cold streets of London consumed her. Every look from Oliver's innocent eyes awakened her dormant conscience, knocking on her closed heart, telling her, "There is still good in you. You can still save someone, even if it's just one child." Nancy began to protect him in secret. She would advise him with quick whispers away from Fagin's eyes, ease his fear with tender words, and give him a glimpse of hope amidst the gang's hell. But she knew that these small gestures wouldn't be enough, and that if Oliver stayed among them, all his innocence would be erased. In a rare moment of courage, she made the most dangerous decision of her life, to betray Fagin. This was a death sentence for her, but she did not back down. She arranged a secret meeting with Mr. Brownlow, the kind man who was looking for Oliver, and there, amidst the darkness and fear, she revealed everything to him. The gang's whereabouts, their plans, and how the boy could be rescued. But in the world of crime, a secret doesn't remain hidden for long. Bill Sikes, the most terrifying man in the gang, hard-hearted, quick-tempered, knowing only the language of violence, soon found out. When he confronted Nancy with her betrayal, neither her tears nor her pleas helped her. The scene was tragic. He beat her savagely, then killed her mercilessly. Nancy fell, her blood mixing with the dirt of London, but in her final moment, she was not an ordinary victim. She chose to die trying to save an innocent life. She departed carrying features of sadness on her face, but also features of bravery. Nancy, swallowed by the darkness in her youth, left behind a ray of conscience that would always remind us that even in the depths of crime, humanity can still blossom.
The end of the gang. After a series of dark events and conspiracies woven in the alleys of London, the thread of justice gradually began to close in on the gang. It was no longer possible to hide the crimes, and Fagin's claws were no longer able to grasp all the threads. The children he taught the arts of pickpocketing, the streets that witnessed his thefts, and the victims who suffered from his evil, all combined to form a noose tightening around his neck. One night, the police raided Fagin's hideout. The cunning old man, who always thought he was smarter than everyone, found himself surrounded on all sides. His sly smile and old plans did him no good. He was led away in shackles, with all eyes fixed on him, as if the entire city was celebrating his downfall. And when the verdict was issued, his fate was nothing but the gallows. Thus Fagin, the man who turned innocent children into thieves, came to a dark end, becoming a lesson for those who thought crime could endure. As for Bill Sikes, his fall was different. The violent man, who knew only the language of force and blood in his life, began to live his final days surrounded by the ghosts of his sins. Nancy's face never left his imagination. Her blood on his hands haunted him wherever he went. Whenever he walked down an alley, he felt eyes were watching him, and whenever he heard a sound at night, he was certain that death was approaching him. He could no longer sleep, no longer eat. He turned into a wounded beast pursued by the specter of his crime. In a desperate attempt to escape, he climbed onto the roof of an old house, trying to sneak away from his pursuers. But fate was lying in wait for him. As he clung to ropes trying to save himself, he lost his balance and fell from a great height. He fell with a crashing sound that ended his life in an instant, as if divine justice had sealed his fate with its own hand, bringing an end to a man whose life was stained with blood. Thus, a dark chapter of London's history was closed. The gang that sowed fear in hearts was ended, and a new door opened for Oliver. A door of hope and the life he deserved. The full truth. After years of wandering, tears, and straying between the cruelty of workhouses and the clutches of gangs, the time had come for the curtain to be raised on the hidden truth. All his life, Oliver thought of himself as just an orphan of unknown destiny, a child who did not know where he came from or where he belonged. But fate was concealing a great secret that would change everything. With the downfall of Fagin and the death of Bill Sikes, the threads of the conspiracy began to unravel, and testimonies, documents, and evidence that had been buried in the dark emerged. Those papers held the answer. Oliver was not a foundling, as people claimed,
but the legitimate son of a respectable family, a family of standing who was separated from them due to conspiracies of greed and avarice orchestrated by Fagin and his associates. They had tried to bury his true identity to keep him an easy tool in their hands. That moment was like a dream for him. To know that he was not just a number in the workhouse, nor a burden on anyone, but a part of a real family history, a family that could have surrounded him with love since his birth, had it not been for the dark hands that stole his childhood. And here emerged Mr. Brownlow, the kind man who believed in Oliver's innocence from the very first moment. He did not hesitate for a moment to open his heart and his home to him, declaring that he would not leave him an orphan anymore. He adopted him in every sense of the word, finally granting him what he had been deprived of for so long: a true family, the warmth of a home, and a respectable name to carry with pride. Oliver sat in his new home, contemplating the brightly lit windows and the walls that held reassurance, and he smiled. It was not just a happy ending for an orphan. It was a victory of innocence over cruelty, of truth over lies, and of mercy over crime. Oliver had finally found his place in this world, not in the dark alleys or in the hands of gangs, but in the care of a family who loved him and believed in him. Thus, the page of pain was closed, and a new page full of hope began. Conclusion. From an orphan child in the alleys of London to a young man who knows the meaning of family and compassion, Oliver Twist's journey was not just a personal story. It was a cry launched by Charles Dickens in the face of a cruel society that left the poor to their fate and treated children as cheap tools. The novel Oliver Twist exposed the social injustice in industrial England, but it transcended the limits of its time to become a timeless story of hope and humanity. A message that tells us all, even in the darkest of times, innocence remains stronger than corruption, and hope is capable of survival.